Hello and welcome to the first of this week's lectures on the topic of childhood and social identity. And you can probably see from the pictures that I've chosen to put on this opening slide that, being the social psychologist that I am, I've chosen to look at areas focusing on conflict and division. So during this video, I will give a brief reminder of social identity approaches, very brief, which is really building on material that you've looked at in second year. Some of this may even be familiar to some of you. I'm going to introduce the significance of looking at social identity in childhood. So we're going to focus particularly on a society with a history in division, Northern Ireland, but I will touch out and broaden on other ideas of division, thinking ahead to the next lecture, and also look at some future directions for research in this area. So to give an incredibly brief description of social identity theory, you will remember it's a theory of group membership, of how we align ourselves with others through notions of social identity, notions of shared group membership. Now that's a very flexible system. At times the same person might be a lecturer and be considering themselves in relation to students, might be British, a nationality, and considering themselves to people who are of a different nationality, might be male considering themselves to female. So there's many potential identities that are accessible to all of us. And in fact, you'll remember from the studies that some of the very early studies, the minimal group studies, the importance was that actually group membership didn't need to be based around very much at all beyond the knowledge of a group. However, what all of those memberships, the theory argues, have in common is how we undergo particular social categorization processes wherein we categorize ourselves as one group and we categorize maybe other people as either in the same group or other. And through that we go processes of similarity and differentiation. We tend to view people who are in the same group as more similar to one another, and people who are in out groups, different groups, as being different to one another. Again, I stress, go back to second year to look at the subtleties of this. Ethnicity, of course, is one of those major social identities that we're going to use in our daily lives, and as other theorists say, it's a central aspect of our self-definition. But it's really important once we start looking at identity development to recognize that there's multiple processes at play. So again, in your second year, you'll have looked at ideas around maturation, stages that one moves through as one matures, e.g., and for example, I've given a reference here to the idea of cognitive development, simply allowing you to engage in more complex categorization processes, but also about context. So people explore activities, behaviors and roles in culturally specific positions. So this might mean about their increasing autonomy and independence, but there's also interactions with other people. There's demands. As we grow older, we find ourselves being placed into expectations of roles, and we move through various social contexts. So here I've mentioned schools. That's going to be really important in the second video. Through this, and if we were looking at ethnic identity, but we could look at other meaningful social identities, we can say that as we develop, we grow more positive and negative feelings about ethnic identity and our own identity and position in that. Okay. So why is social psychology in a place to look at this? Well, as I've hinted at in the last slide, children show different patterns of development in different countries. This begins to raise questions about whether we can simply go through a universal stage process or whether we need to look at people in context. And you'll be unsurprised in this particular unit that we're going to look at people in particular contexts. Who's the quote here? The development of children's relationships with their country is a developmental phenomenon which is mediated by cognitive processes on the one hand, so we're not ruling out the idea of development as being important, but always looking at the political and cultural milieu, the political and cultural environment from which that development is occurring in. So the context that I want to look at development from in particular in this video is that of Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, i.e. it's governed from Westminster along with England, Wales and Scotland. It is British. However, there has been long conflict in Northern Ireland around whether that is appropriate, and many people who live in Northern Ireland feel that actually it should be part of the Republic of Ireland and be the Irish state. So it is a divided society. That division can be roughly drawn along religious grounds, but I'm hesitating as I say that. So roughly, if you look at the background of people in Northern Ireland, people with a Christian Protestant background would consider themselves British and believe that Northern Ireland should be British. There are terms associated with that. Unionist, i.e. meaning believing in the union of the United Kingdom, or loyalist, which often refers to the idea that these people are defining themselves by being loyal to the crown. The alternative perspective is people from a Catholic background who see their relationship more with the wider Irish government, i.e. the Republic of Ireland. So they might define themselves as Irish, may call themselves nationalist, believing that Ireland should be a nation, or Republican, which is also a way of considering that they should be free from the crown and be part of the Republic of Ireland. Now, between 1968 and 1998, Northern Ireland was a violent place. You will probably have heard of organisations such as the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. They are a Republican paramilitary group. There are also loyalist paramilitary groups on the other side. And in the 30 years between 1968 and 1998, about 3,600 people or more were killed, 40,000, 50,000 people injured in the violence of Northern Ireland, either by Republican or loyalist paramilitaries or terrorist organisations, or indeed by the British police force or military. The military were deployed in Northern Ireland. Now, 3,600 may or may not sound to you like a great number. If we considered that in a larger society, so if we factored up the USA to the USA, that's the equivalent for population of about 630,000 people being killed. So Northern Ireland is a very small society. It was likely that if you live in Northern Ireland, you will know people who were touched, quite probably injured and maybe killed during the Troubles. Now, the overt conflict came to an end in 1998 with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, where there was an agreement to power sharing in Northern Ireland, so between both Protestant and Catholic communities, and the system was put in place where both had a say in politics, and both the Republic of Ireland and the UK government would also support that. And so we might think that since then there's been a post-Accord generation, people who've grown up actually with peace, with the disarmament of organisations such as the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, or loyalist paramilitary groups. So our question now is, why do we still look at this place? Well, we might begin to ask whether, despite the absence of explicit violence, are we still looking at socialization of division by parents and communities, and also the idea that there may be continuing sectarian violence, and indeed there is, that occurs across group lines. So the idea that what we're looking at stopped 22 years ago is not appropriate. So there are still approximately about 1,000 sectarian incidents reported to the police annually. Sectarian meaning violence across communities, so Catholic violence against Protestants or Protestant violence against Catholics, for the purpose of it being because of those divisions. And it's fair to say that young people are often exposed to this sectarian behaviour. So they might be direct participants in it, be involved in acts of violence or such like, or alternatively just experience living in that society. So some of the images that I have up here are from the last couple of years, related still to acts of crime. It's also worth noting, if you travel to Northern Ireland, it's very obvious that actually the police force there are using different kinds of vehicles and just look different. So it's the only part of the UK where the police are driving around in armoured vehicles as standard. So you can see up in the top there's an armoured Land Rover. So Northern Ireland has long been a place of interest for social psychologists because we like looking at disharmony. It's a bit of a shame. So just to give you a real nice example, I think, of social identity and cognitive development interplaying, here's a classic study of development and identity. So this is the first ever article published in the Irish Journal of Psychology on children, participants aged 6 to 10, and all they had to do was to sort shapes into either colour form or shapes. And what we normally see in development is that children find it easier to sort by colour than to break that set and sort by shapes. However, the colours that I've chosen on this slide are not accidental. So you can see I've chosen blue and red and green and orange. And one of the significant elements of the sectarian divide in Northern Ireland is that colours are associated with groups. So here in particular, blue and red are associated with the British flag. Green and orange, said Jehoda and Harrison, are associated with the Irish flag. So the Irish flag is green, white and orange. Possibly not in that order. And so they asked children to do various sorting. And let's look at what the results were of this task. So the task showed that children in Northern Ireland seem to have greater difficulty with this task than in other places. And the problem came when they were asked to start sorting by shape rather than colour. So what we found, or what Yehoda and Harrison found, was that children resisted putting together colours that were associated with opposing groups. So here the blue triangle and the green triangle, or the blue circle and the green circle, would be met with resistance. Children would have a delay before they were willing to put those shapes together. And the typical quote from the study was a child saying, "You can't put Protestants with Catholics." So although for the experimenters they were presenting it as a shape sorting task, the children themselves had imposed the classifications of the sectarian society: green Irish, green Catholic, blue British, blue Protestant, and were refusing to put those together. So that's really young children, and it's quite a shocking study. Here's a study you might remember from last year, which just begins to explore this as children grow older. So here the participants are secondary school children living on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and they were just asked questions to write an essay. What nationality? The question, which I don't think we'd get away with setting as a university question, because it's rather complicated, but was, what nationality are you? Would you be annoyed if you heard someone referring to you as whatever the opposite of your identity was? What's the impact of the border, and what's the impact of your parents? And I mean, first of all, the important thing was that people were very comfortable in talking about their identity. That came from different sources. So here we've got the idea that people might draw out on other people to sort of draw reference for why they're proud. So for example, here there's a saying, "I'm proud to be Irish because there's other great people who are Irish. Take these two footballers, they're Irish." Some people try to downplay it, and this is quite a common feature. Maybe think about your own thoughts. Lots of people downplay their nationality. My nationality means I'm from Ireland. It isn't important to me. Health important, and family, but nationality, where I'm from, that's not important. That question about what about if somebody called you the opposite identity, though, was very important, because it began to draw out that actually nationality was really important for people. If you said, "How important is being Irish to you?" less important. But when people were answering the question, "How is it important that you're not misidentified as Irish or British?" then children began to actually react quite strongly. So the main reason I would be annoyed is that I am no way British. I do not live in Northern Ireland. I live in the Republic of Ireland. Some British people are very easy to get along with, but I think they should live in their own country and not on our island, because I don't like the way they've just come across the sea and said, "We just want this land." That's obviously someone who is Irish and in the Republic of Ireland. Here's someone who's obviously Protestant and British and in Northern Ireland. The border is good as it splits us from Ireland. People were able to talk about what is driving these identifications, so the role of family. People know the histories of their family, even if they then attempt to deny influence. So my parents always take me to Mass, so to Catholic Church on Sunday, but I don't think they have any effect on my beliefs, despite taking me to church every week. Or they recognise division from other people, so other parents and the influence that they have on their children. I'm not influenced by my parents, but I do see parents looking out their window shouting at Protestant and Catholic people while their children sit beside them, and either they take it all in or shout with them. Young children do this because they are either told to or learn how to. So the conclusions of this study were that although that young people often weren't acknowledging divisions, young people tended to argue that they were inclusive and particularly at the personal level were minimizing difference. We still see an awful lot of drivers that are creating divisive identities. So parental and adolescent choice, people referring to national and religious identities, people still very much saying there's a difference between these groups, and generally a denigrated difference. And so what Muldoon and colleagues were stressing is just the socialization processes. So this isn't just a passive cognitive process, but it is about being socialized into a divided society. So we might expect, as children and they undergo cognitive development, then they are smarter, they're more able to work with concepts, and therefore they're more able to pick out individuating characteristics of group members, i.e. thinking about lower prejudice. But this is not supported by evidence. In fact, we seem to see the opposite, that it is as children develop that identity becomes more associated with prejudice. So from processes of not identifying differences to them becoming aware of differences, to showing a preference to differences, to finally showing a prejudice towards one group rather than the other. So at that final stage, so Nesdale talks about beginning to understand ethnic constancy, i.e. you're in a group and you're not going to move from that group. You're developing greater social cognitive skills, so you're able to do that differentiation of yourself from other people. And so we see greater social identity processes that draw out differences. Of course, it really is important to say this isn't just a Northern Ireland case. So there's exposure to new and different cultures. EU state studies show ethnic segregation across the EU, and particularly so for the last 5 years, we've seen increasing violence and hate speech against identifiably different people, so asylum seekers, migrants, and of course ethnic minorities in more general. And in fact, actually, it's worth saying that Northern Ireland as a case study is no different from anywhere else in that it is increasingly diverse. And so although the sectarian divisions remain, we now have added alternative differences being introduced into that society. So just another couple of studies that are going to stay with white British children mainly. So Adam Rutland has looked at the development of national prejudice, national in-group favouritism in particularly white British children, and looks at how different ages have different developments. So 6 to 8 year olds children recognise themselves as being British or English here, and mainly talk about it in terms of personal experiences rather than in terms of wider conceptual ideas of what it means to be British. So these children go, well, I speak English, my family's English, so I'm English, friends are in England and my family's in England, so that, or I like talking, I like talking this interesting, this individual. They don't like talking in Chinese Mandarin, so they like talking in English, so that makes them English. But it's by a slightly later age, so secondary school, that you start to see these external ideas associated, so the stereotypes of what makes British. So here's someone who talks about the best army in the world, good football and rugby teams. We have a British Empire and the monarchy. We're not a poor country, civilized and friendly compared to the French and Germans. And actually that's quite interesting, because overall in their study they showed that this particular group of children, when asked to define Britishness, only began to show prejudice in terms of the German people, frequently mentioning the Second World War as being an indication of British. So this memory of an intergroup conflict with groups was increasing and driving prejudice and intergroup discrimination. Of course, sadly, there's more to it than that. So in further studies, Rutland has also gone on to look at ethnic differentiation in white British participants, and shows racial bias developing even at the age of 5. So it's not just about stereotypes of Germany, but is beginning to be developed on race grounds as well. And I've just included this little extra bullet point in here just because of knowing what's going to come in the second video when we begin to look at mixing and contact. Okay, so the conclusions of this section are considering the development of Northern Ireland, and we've particularly focused on conflict identity, so the way that children develop notions of who they are and also their difference from groups, and the significance of that in a place such as Northern Ireland, which has a history of division. Those divisions can be implicit as well as explicit, i.e. not all of the participants are writing about things that they're even acknowledging they recognise difference, and yet it comes through in their writings about difference. And just showing that social identity has multiple areas of influence. So if we go right back to the Jehoda and Harrison task, even a simple perceptual task of shape sorting is based around identity and difference, not just the obvious places of social judgments of self and of other. So just finally, thinking about ideas around youth, identity, peace and conflict, Shelley McKone, who I'm citing quite a lot in these couple of lectures and give some reading, considers where future research should aim for. So what they say is it's important to consider positive youth development, i.e. not just seeing youths or children as passive victims and perpetrators as harm, but understanding how they have an active role on this. So we can see how ethnic identity development can be related to positive outcomes. We need to move just beyond people being passive recipients of things that cause mental health difficulties, and how we need to look on harnessing and promoting positive youth attitudes and behaviours. Interestingly, for people who are quite hardcore social psychologists, as Shelley McKone is very much a contact theorist, they say we need to look at a social ecology approach that involves individual characteristics, it involves immediate social context, but it also involves structural factors, something that I'm sure that if you're taking this unit, you will want to explore further. And finally, this slide simply demonstrates and shows the references that I've used in this video.